all around great human being, friend, all of those things. Ariel Helwani, host of the Ariel Helwani Show, joins us. And man, we had to pick up the bat phone. I'm always so honest with you. We've known each other for a long time, man. You know, the minute we started this show, our producer Mike kept screaming, "Oh my God, UFC 319, UFC 319, UFC 319." I think I've heard about 50 times that this is going to be the single greatest UFC fight in the history of all fights. Give me just the layman's term. Why is everybody so pumped for this fight this weekend?
Okay, well, first, before I get to that, congratulations to you both and the whole team on the new show. Very exciting. I love it. And we are watching and supporting on this side of the fence. So well done. What a time for me to come on, not just with UFC 319 coming up this Saturday from the United Center in Chicago, but also with the UFC's massive news earlier in the week signing that gigantic deal with Paramount. So a lot going on, as always, in the world of combat sports and UFC in particular, UFC 319. So I know Mike is a hardcore fan, and a hardcore fan will tout that this is one of the best fights of all time. In reality, all hardcore fans are like, the next one's the best one, the next one's the best one, the next one's the best one, because these numbered shows are sort of like, you know, the big dogs, if you will, as far as the UFC is concerned. It's you know, they're premium live events, as WWE likes to say. And here you have a guy named Khamzat Chimaev, that's the guy with the beard on the left, going up to a guy named Dricus Du Plessis, the champion of the middleweight division. Both of them are undefeated in the UFC. This is for the middleweight title. So DDP, the champ, going up against Khamzat. Look at these guys. They're absolutely shredded. And they have very, very loyal fan bases. DDP on top, the champ from South Africa. Khamzat representing both Chechnya, also the UAE, also Sweden. He spent a lot of time there. He has been a locomotive. I remember when I was doing my show with Daniel Cormier during the pandemic, he debuted in 2020 on Fight Island. He fought twice in the span of 10 days and then a third time a month and a half later in September. And I said, if Khamzat Chimaev is not UFC champion by the end of 2021, something went horribly wrong. Well, actually, a few things went horribly wrong. He is still undefeated, but he got really, really bad COVID. He retired for a minute. Then he had some visa problems. He couldn't fight in the United States, but still here he is, and on the verge of potentially realizing all the great aspirations that everyone had for him, because the guy is a freaking monster. He's a beast. DDP, on the other hand, people didn't have as many expectations for him because he's a bit of an awkward fighter, and a lot of fighters, including some that were on my show earlier this week, called him the weirdest and the worst best fighter because he always finds a way to win. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look technical. It's not textbook, but he finds a way to win and he continues to win. He's undefeated. So what's going to happen here? It's a big question. A lot of people are very excited to find out, like your producer, Mike.
It sounds like every season of The Bachelor, right? In the most shocking twist yet. It's like, this is the best fight yet. We brought up our fabulous producer, Mike Goldfarb. Now, he filled me in on a man named Carlos Prates. And
Oh, yes.
I don't know if I can truly wrap my mind around exactly how many cigarettes does he smoke in a day?
He's trying his best to wean off the cigarettes, but he's going about like 10 a day, up until he leaves to the arena. He's like an old school baseball manager who's smoking in the dugout. He will smoke. He said to me earlier this week, I will smoke. There he is. I will smoke. No problem. I will get a couple in before we go to the arena because, of course, in the arena, you can't smoke. Like, oh my gosh, what a crazy thing. He's a great fighter. People love this guy. He is coming off his first loss in the UFC. He had won 11 in a row. He's fighting a guy named Geoff Neal. And I won't say he, like the kids like to say fraud checked. He was not fraud checked. He lost to a very good, smart fighter named Ian Machado Gary back in April. And so this is his bounce back fight. And to me, that's always very interesting. When a guy has won that many fights in a row and then loses, and it was close but not super close. He went the distance, 5 rounds in the main event in Kansas City. You always want to see how they rebound. You want to see how they respond. Do they change things? Do they are they gun shy? Are they a little more tentative? Things like that. Now, he didn't get knocked out, so I'm not expecting that, but he did say, I'll be honest, I didn't listen to my coaches. I strayed from the game plan. I was a little bit too selfish on the night. And so perhaps now he'll fight a little smarter. He's fighting a guy named Geoff Neal who's never been stopped via strikes in the UFC, and he says he's going to be the first. So that's one of the many fights on this card that I'm really, really looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. I am not one to yuck anybody's yum, whether that's cigarettes or not. But let's get into some of the biggest UFC news really in a long time. 7 years, $7.7 billion deal with Paramount. What was your reaction when you first heard this deal was coming to be, and who do you think won the negotiations?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So there's 4 entities involved here, right? The UFC's deal was coming to an end. Their domestic deal here in the United States with ESPN, end of 2025. So we all knew this was coming. At the beginning of the year, we had a prediction show for the upcoming year, and I said this was going to be the story of the year because I expected that for the first time in their history, the UFC would get a deal that would get them over $1 billion a year in terms of rights fees in America. I never suspected, and no one really ever expected, that they would get it from one entity. We all thought they would have to split it up, just like the NFL does, the NBA does, MLB, NHL, etc. Here, first shock, they get it from one entity. I expected that they would split it up maybe 2, max 3 ways, which have never done in their history, but that's the sign of the times. And I thought ESPN would 100% still be involved. I think the deal has worked out pretty well for both parties since 2019 when it started. And so I thought it would be some combination of ESPN, maybe a little Netflix, a little Amazon, a little Apple. Paramount was never really in the running. But then a few funny things happened along the way. As you guys know, there was this big settlement between CBS and the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Then this merger finally went through between Skydance and Paramount. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, you get this massive deal where David Ellison, the new head honcho over there, the son of Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, says, I want to own a sport. And this is one of the last sports that you can own for a very long time because everyone else is tied up with their rights fees deals for the foreseeable future. And so I was very surprised about that. I think it's a great deal for the UFC. It's the biggest deal that they've ever received. Their last deal with ESPN, by the way, was approximately $550 million a year. Now they're getting $1.1 billion a year. So they've doubled it. That's tremendous business. On the side of the fans, they win as well because pay-per-views are gone. For the first time in UFC history, there will be no more pay-per-views. All those numbers shows, like 319 this weekend, that's on pay-per-views, $79.99 if you want to watch the main card. That's done. All the shows are going to be on Paramount Plus. Currently, it's $12.99 for ad-free subscription, $7.99 for the regular subscription with ads. I suspect by the time this deal goes into play in 2026, that will all go up. But still, way cheaper than paying about $1,000 a year if you're buying every single show. So the fans win as well. I think for Paramount, it's great because, again, Ellison gets to own a sport. He locks them up for 7 years. Now you get to be the exclusive home of the UFC, and you get the option to sign them up when their deals globally come to their conclusion. The big one is the fighters. What does this all mean for the fighters? Right now, we don't know. Dana White says the bonuses are going to go up. What does that mean? Well, 4 times a night, every single show, they give out bonuses. 2 to the fight of the night participants, 2 to the best performance of the night participants. Currently, that's $50K. That's chump change for them. Dana said he's going to raise that. How much? Is it going to be $100K? That would be great. What about the base pay? Currently, the base pay for a UFC debutant is 12 and 12, meaning $12,000 to show up, $12,000 if you win your fight. That's it. Is that going to get raised? Is it going to go to 20, 16 and 16? What about the top dogs? The champions currently, and I'm sorry for going long here, but it's a very complex thing. The champions of the UFC get something called pay-per-view points, meaning if I'm on UFC 319 and I'm Dricus Du Plessis and that show sells 750,000 pay-per-views, I get a cut of that. I participate in the business. Now that there's no more pay-per-views, what happens to their points? That's the great incentive to become a champion of the UFC because only champions get pay-per-view points. So what happens? All that remains to be seen. By the way, if you're a regular sports fan, you know that NBA players, NFL players, they tend to participate around 50% of the general revenue. As far as TV deals, in the NBA, when the TV deals come through, the salary cap goes up exponentially, just as the likes of Kevin Durant. Guess what? The fighters, I should say, get 0% of this deal in terms of revenue sharing because there's no CBA, there's no collective bargaining, there's no Players Association, Fighters Association. So that remains to be seen. But overall, if you're a fan, UFC or Paramount, I'd say this is a pretty big win.
Let me just ask you then about the ESPN side of it, because I saw some of your conversation talking about some concern here. And I'm going to tell a story on mic that, frankly, I've never told in front of a microphone, but I told you years ago. When I first started at ESPN in 2017, at the time, I remember going to our bosses in radio and saying, hey, this is a big UFC event. Should we talk about it? And they laughed and they said, absolutely not. Our audience does not care. It was about 3 months later that ESPN signed their initial deal with UFC. And that's when the bosses, the same bosses that said they don't care, came to Sarah Spain and I and said, you need to start having this guy named Ariel Helwani on your show every single time there's a big pay-per-view. It's good for the publicity of the sport, and we have a deal with them now. How concerned are you that now that ESPN is not a partner with UFC, they will again decide that the sport is irrelevant and it will no longer be part of the casual consciousness.
Well, you're 100% right about that. Just ask the NHL as well, right? They're on ESPN. They're getting covered, Valerie Melrose, all that stuff. They leave ESPN. They don't talk about them. They come back to ESPN in the last couple of years, and now you've got great analysts and writers and insiders and all that stuff. So I suspect the same thing is going to happen. You use the word concern, though. I'm not concerned. In fact, it's good for us over at uncrowned.com and Yahoo Sports, because if they're not covering it, there's just a lot more for us to do. And so there's less competition. But if I'm the UFC brass, if I'm Dana White, look, he'll never say this. He wanted to stay with ESPN. The dream was always ESPN for him. He wanted that validation. He wanted to be on the ticker. He wanted to watch the NBA finals and see on the scorers table, you know, the upcoming pay-per-view being advertised. You can't buy that. We did a whole breakdown. All of ESPN's social numbers, and I'm talking Instagram, TikTok, IG, Twitter, YouTube, all of them combined, right, equals out to approximately 300 million either subs or followers, right? Because some people use subs, okay? CBS, all of them combined. So we're talking CBS Sports, Paramount Plus, whatever would fall, Paramount, whatever fall, anything. We tried to get anything under the CBS umbrella that would pertain to UFC. It's about 32 million all. So 300 million to 32 million. People aren't paying attention to how much the UFC is going to be out of that sort of social consciousness. Kids, they're constantly on their phones, right? They're constantly on Instagram, TikTok. The UFC benefited greatly from those ESPN SportsCenter accounts. That doesn't appear. So now obviously you've got this huge deal and it's going to be all fine. They're not going to be bankrupt. It's going to be great, but they're going to lose out. And to your point, .com's not going to cover them as much. First Take isn't going to cover them as much. SportsCenter isn't going to cover them after the shows and all that stuff. And they're gonna not be as part of the conversation. And so, yeah, if I'm someone in the UFC, I'm thinking, how do we remain? And by the way, earlier in the week, Mark Shapiro, who's the COO and the president of TKO, which is the parent company of the UFC and WWE, was sort of like touting this thing of like, hey, pay-per-view is dead. This is great. Pay-per-view is dead, right? This is great for the fans. And Dana was the one who was like, yo, pay-per-view isn't dead yet. We still have to sell a pay-per-view this Saturday and 4 more after that. And I think part of the reason why he did that was to not end this ESPN deal on a bad note. Because if I'm someone in Bristol, our old bosses over there, and I'm hearing Mark Shapiro say pay-per-view is dead when there's 319 this Saturday and we're on the hook for that pay-per-view. I'm like, hey guys, are we ending this the wrong way? Are we trying to torpedo our numbers on the way out? So I think there's going to be an interesting dance being played over the next few months.
And look, good business practices on his part. It's a reminder to all of us that this deal has not already kicked in yet. And yes, of course, the UFC losing some of that publicity from ESPN, take it at whatever it's worth. But I always believe leagues that are growing or want to continue to grow, there are 2 very important things: investment and accessibility. And that's what this new Paramount deal gives. It's almost an $8 billion deal, and it feels more accessible that it's not behind that $80 per fight pay-per-view paywall. So how do you think this deal can make the UFC one of the biggest sports leagues in the world?
Well, already from a rights fee standpoint, they're in the conversation. Obviously, the NFL is gigantic, NBA, but they're now like top 5, top 6, and that's a huge win for them because not that long ago, they weren't even on cable. They weren't even on pay-per-view. I'm talking just like 25 or so years ago. That's not that long ago. And so that is big. Being on CBS is going to be big. So right now they have 30 fight nights, which are they're sort of like lesser tier events, and 13 pay-per-views, the numbered shows, 319, 320, etc. They're not going to be pay-per-views anymore. They're going to be PLEs, premium live events. That's what WWE calls them because they don't have pay-per-view anymore either. And so the sentiment, and again, they keep like kind of doing this awkward dance, but it seems like come 2026, those 13 premium live events are going to all be on Paramount Plus, and 4 of those are going to be on CBS, including this much talked about White House card on July 4th, 2026, which is a very real thing, and it'll be a part of USA's 250th anniversary celebration. And what a crazy thing that 10 years ago, the sport of mixed martial arts was banned in the state of New York, couldn't even do a show at MSG. 10 years later, they're going to be having a show on the White House lawn. It's just crazy to see how far things have come. And of course, a lot of that is because of the relationship between Dana White and President Trump. in any event, that's going to be huge, and they'll be a part of the consciousness, and there'll be promotion during the NFL playoffs and during the Masters and March Madness and all that stuff. But I do really wonder, if they're going to lose out. Like, I think when you are a part of the ESPN ecosystem, you are just a part of the sports conversation. And again, this is not me just poo-pooing the deal. It's a brilliant deal, and they made out like bandits, and congratulations to them. But I think a lot of people are discounting just how big it is to be a part of the worldwide leader ecosystem. And I think a lot of people are discounting how much ESPN helped the UFC. The UFC doesn't get 1.1 billion without ESPN. If they're going from Fox to 2026, Paramount isn't paying. Like, ESPN elevated them, and they benefited greatly from being the only game in town during the pandemic. And ESPN, look, I remember 2020, there's no sports going on except for the UFC. Guys, I'm on the A block of the 6 p.m. Sports Center talking about Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. That never happened. We're not talking UFC fights in the A block of the 6 p.m. Sports Center, but there was nothing else going on. And so now all of a sudden, I've got my friends and family members being like, who should I bet on this weekend? I'm so bored. I'm talking like the very early dark days, May 2020. They benefited greatly from it, and they'll be fine. But I do wonder if there'll be a bit of a ceiling as a result of leaving the worldwide leader.
All right, you love clicks. I love clicks. We love clicks. We all love clicks. Let's get some. Logan Paul threw out some accusations. You leaking some things. I know you can talk about it on your show, but I'd rather you talk about it on ours so everybody finds out about Yahoo Sports Daily. The floor is yours, my friend.
I was having such a good day, guys, and now you're going to get me all riled up again. I appreciate that. I was on Logan's show, Impulsive, and it was a great time, and I appreciate them having me. And my kids think that's cool, and my nephews think that's cool. And I have no issues with Logan or his brother Jake, and I think what they built is incredible. There were a few things that one might think could have irked me. They showed up wearing a shirt with my face on it and called me a D1 Glazer. That's fine. I could roll with the punches. In case you don't know, that's like a Division I Glazer, the highest form of glaze, which I actually take as a compliment because most people would actually quantify me as a D1 hater. So this is good. It's a positive thing, I think. He's eating during the interview. He's scrolling on his phone. All those things I could roll off my back. It's all good. But the one thing that got me fired up, and the one thing that I felt compelled to respond to, in fact, I actually thought they were going to take this out because I thought it made him look bad, but they didn't, was that I was talking about like how much journalism means to me and how much being trustworthy means to me, and how if I wasn't trustworthy, if I didn't keep my word, if I was a loose lips type of guy, reporter, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be talking to me. I'd be doing something else. To me, if you say something to me, you meaning like a source, a fighter, a coach, a manager, it goes into a special place in my heart and in my brain. It goes into a vault that I would never open unless you want me to open it. If you tell me something, if you call me up today with information and you say, hey, this guy's fighting this guy, unless you say otherwise, to me, it's always off the record. A lot of reporters aren't this way. They'll run with it. I believe in relationships. And so when people say that I leaked this or leaked that, like, they don't understand how seriously I take this stuff. And so when I was talking about this, because we were talking about the old Brock Lesnar story from 2016, I didn't like the word leak, and I didn't like the insinuation that I did something wrong, because I didn't, because I just got the information just like any insider does. Someone who wasn't working for the UFC, I wasn't privy to any sort of insider knowledge from the company. This is the sort of story that people like to tell, and it's 1,000% not true. He then said, well, you did that to me. And I said, absolutely not. And he said, yes, when I was in talks to fight Conor McGregor, you DM'd me and asked me if it was true. And I said no. And then you went on your show and said, Logan Paul told me it's not true, and you ruined the whole thing. In fact, the opposite happened. When that story came out and Conor McGregor tweeted that he was in talks with the billion-dollar like crazy family in India, like they're one of the richest families in the world, the Ambani family, and said he's in talks to fight Logan Paul over in India, I did reach out to him, which he revealed, so now it's okay. And I asked him if it was true, and he said yes. He said, yes, it's true. And then other people said yes to me. I checked. I wouldn't go just with one source. That's like the number one rule. But I said, hey, all good. We never spoke. I know this is a big deal. I went back and watched that clip, and I wanted to see, did I screw up? Did I misremember this? No, I never even said I reached out to him. Sometimes you might say, I reached out to this guy and he didn't respond, but he really did respond. I didn't even go there. I didn't even give like an inkling of that. And in addition to that, I went on the show and said, this is true. I did the opposite of what he claimed I did, which was poo-pooing it. I didn't poo-poo it. I actually said there's credence to this. This could actually happen. And so it bothered me that he insinuated that I broke his trust. It bothered me that he got the story wrong. And it bothered me that he like just kind of like he kept doubling and tripling down on this idea that I just go and DM people and then I run with it. That's absolutely not true. I would never do that. And oh, by the way, I would never go off one source. You have to have at least two. That's rule number one at Syracuse University, the Newhouse School of Public Communications. And so the whole thing kind of irked me, and then I felt the need to respond. But like in reality, it's all good. We come from different worlds. He's a content creator. He's a YouTuber. He's an incredible professional wrestler. I'm a guy who maybe takes all of this very, very seriously, and it's my life and my reputation, and it's all I have to hang my hat on. And so when someone throws that out, I'm going to defend myself.
Totally fair and justified in doing that. And one more before we let you go, because we have taken way too much of your time.
No problem.
But Kristaps Porziņģis, of course, NBA star, has said that he hopes to start an MMA career after his basketball playing days are over. Would probably be the first 7-footer in the UFC or in MMA period.
Yes.
Thoughts on Kristaps Porziņģis pursuing a career in the UFC?
So first off, I love KP. I'll always love KP. I'm a huge Knicks fan. And despite the fact that, he left and it ended poorly and even went to the Celtics, I'm thrilled he's not on the Celtics anymore because I don't have the same kind of animosity towards the Hawks, even though Hawks fans want to believe Knicks fans really hate them. We don't really care about them. It's all well and good. I also know he's a hardcore MMA fan. In fact, one of the first times that I had the pleasure of running into him, we were talking about MMA and I couldn't believe just how much he knew about it. Like he is hardcore. In fact, sometimes I'll get like random messages from him being like, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. I don't think he would. It was like, during the NBA finals, during the Mavericks, he's hitting me up asking like, what's the scoop with Conor McGregor fighting Michael Chandler? I'm like, bro, you're about to fight in the NBA finals. You're about to play in the NBA finals. This is crazy that you're that big of a fan. I love it. And so I believe him when he says this. And in fact, he's told me something like this as well, as far as like telling the teams that he wouldn't do it while he's playing, but then, later on in his career. Who knows how his body feels later on, but I would love to see it. Darko Milicic, if you remember him from way back in the day, he actually dabbled in a little bit of kickboxing post-NBA. So it has been done before. Darren Williams, former point guard for the New Jersey Nets, Brooklyn, obviously the Jazz as well. He had a boxing match against Frank Gore. So we've seen this. We've seen some guys transition. It's usually the NFL players that go from playing to fighting, but I would be all in, and I would wish him the absolute best. I would love to see it happen, or maybe just jiu-jitsu. I know he likes jiu-jitsu as well, so maybe that would be good. Although he has the long limbs, and that might not be great for him because it's easy to grab on. But all to say, totally in support, and would love to see it.
Check out the great Ariel Helwani show. He is Ariel Helwani, a great host, a great UFC mind, and an even better dude. Thanks for the time, man. We appreciate you hanging out with us on our first big week of the show. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure. Anytime you want me or anyone on the team. Good luck to you guys. Congratulations. Continued success to all.